Red Bull has just been caught testing a Ferrari concept, and it could completely change the balance of power in Formula 1. Because right now, they are losing over a second per lap. Not because of the driver. Not because of strategy. Because their car is fundamentally unstable. And here's the part nobody expected. Ferrari already solved that problem. So now Red Bull is doing something they almost never do. They're copying. Testing a diffuser concept that could unlock performance they haven't been able to access all season. But this isn't just an upgrade. This is a potential admission that their entire design philosophy was wrong. So what exactly are they testing behind closed doors? Why does this diffuser matter more than engine power? And how can one hidden change transform a car Verstappen called impossible to drive? Stay with me, because once you understand what Red Bull is really doing, you'll see why this could be the most controversial move of the entire season. But to understand why this diffuser is such a big deal, you have to understand what Red Bull is actually struggling with. Because this isn't just about downforce. It's about how that downforce behaves. Right now, the RB22 doesn't have a consistent rear end. One corner it grips. The next, it slides. One lap it feels stable. The next, completely unpredictable. And that's not a driver issue. That's airflow. Because underneath the car, everything depends on control. How the air enters. How it accelerates. And most importantly, how it exits. That's where the diffuser comes in. It's not just pushing the car down. It's managing the entire airflow structure. If the diffuser is unstable, the whole car becomes unstable. And that's exactly what's happening to Red Bull. Their current concept relies on a very narrow operating window. A precise right height. A perfect balance. But the moment that window shifts, even slightly, the airflow breaks. Downforce drops. And the rear of the car becomes unpredictable. That's why Verstappen keeps complaining. Not about lack of speed, but about lack of confidence. Because he never knows exactly what the car will do next. Now here's where Ferrari changes the game. Because instead of chasing maximum peak downforce, they focused on controlling the airflow more gradually, more smoothly. Their diffuser doesn't spike performance. It stabilizes it. And that's a completely different approach. Because when airflow is controlled properly, the car doesn't suddenly lose grip. It transitions. Predictably. Consistently. And that allows the driver to push. Lap after lap. Without hesitation. That's the real advantage. Not more speed. More usable speed. And Red Bull finally realized this. So instead of trying to make their diffuser more aggressive, they're trying to make it more stable. More forgiving. More like Ferrari. But here's where things get complicated. Because the RB22 was never designed for that philosophy. Its entire aerodynamic structure was built around precision, tight windows, extreme performance targets. So now, they're trying to introduce a concept that requires flexibility into a car that was built for rigidity. And that creates tension. Because one part of the car is asking for stability, while the rest is still chasing peak performance. And that mismatch can either unlock the car or completely confuse it. Which is exactly why this test is so important. Because this isn't just about improving the rear. It's about redefining how the entire car behaves. And if this diffuser concept actually works, it doesn't just fix one problem. It changes everything. Balance, confidence, consistency. But if it doesn't, then Red Bull is left with something even worse. A car that is now even harder to understand. Because they're mixing two philosophies that were never meant to work together. And that leads to the next question. The one nobody inside Red Bull wants to answer yet. If they need Ferrari's idea to make their car work, what does that say about everything they built before? And this is where the situation becomes uncomfortable for Red Bull. Because this isn't just about trying something new. It's about admitting something old didn't work. Not publicly. Not officially. But internally, the message is clear. If you're testing a Ferrari-style diffuser, it means your own concept isn't delivering what you expected. And in Formula 1, that realization is dangerous. Because it forces you to question everything. Not just one part. The entire philosophy. But here's where it gets even more serious. Because the diffuser doesn't work alone. It never has. It depends on the floor. The airflow channels. The suspension behavior. Even how the car manages weight transfer. And right now, the RB22 struggles with all of that. Its floor only works properly in a very narrow range. Too low, it destabilizes. Too high, it loses downforce instantly. So even if the diffuser becomes more stable, if the floor doesn't match it, the benefit disappears. And this is the trap Red Bull is walking into. Because they're trying to fix the rear, without fully fixing the foundation. And that creates a very specific risk. A car that feels better in some corners, but worse in others. More stable in high speed, but unpredictable in slow speed. Faster on one lap, but inconsistent over a full stint. And that's not a solution. That's confusion. But there's another layer. One that makes this even more critical. Because this diffuser concept is not just about aerodynamics. It affects how the driver uses the car. Throttle application, corner entry, traction on exit. If the rear becomes more predictable, Verstappen can push earlier, commit harder, trust the car. And that alone is worth tenths of a second per lap. Not because the car is faster, but because the driver can finally use it properly. But if that trust doesn't come back, then nothing else matters. Not upgrades, not strategy, not even raw performance. Because without confidence, the car is never operating at its true potential. And this is why Miami becomes the real turning point. Because for the first time, Red Bull is not just testing parts. They're testing belief. If this works, everything changes. The car becomes understandable. The development direction becomes clear. And most importantly, Verstappen starts believing again. But if it doesn't, then the situation escalates. Because at that point, they've tried aggressive aerodynamics. They've tried micro-optimizations. Now they're trying Ferrari's philosophy. And if none of it delivers, there's only one conclusion left. The RB22 cannot be fixed in its current form. And that's the scenario no top team wants to face. Because you can't redesign a car mid-season. You can only adapt, compromise, manage the damage. So this controversial diffuser test, it's not just another upgrade story. It's the moment Red Bull is forced to confront reality. Because if copying Ferrari doesn't unlock the car, then the problem isn't what they're missing. It's what they built. And once you reach that point, the real question is no longer about performance. It's about how long it takes before everyone else realizes it too. And this is where everything finally becomes clear. Because this isn't really about the diffuser. It's not even about Ferrari. It's about something much bigger. Control. For years, Red Bull controlled everything. The direction of development. The pace of innovation. The standard everyone else tried to reach. They were the reference. The team others copied. But now, that role has shifted. Quietly. Gradually. And now, unmistakably. Because when Red Bull starts testing Ferrari ideas, it means they're no longer leading. They're reacting. And in Formula One, that's the first sign of a power shift. But here's the part that makes this even more critical. Because reacting is always slower than leading. You don't dictate the path. You follow it. And while you're adjusting, your rivals are already improving, refining, extending their advantage. So even if this diffuser concept works, even if Red Bull stabilizes the car, they're not jumping ahead. They're catching up. And catching up is always harder. But now comes the most important layer of all. Because this situation is no longer just technical. It's psychological. Inside the team. Inside the garage. Inside Verstappen's mind. Because drivers don't just feel performance. They feel direction. They feel confidence in the project. And right now, that confidence is fragile. You can hear it in the radio. You can see it in the way he approaches corners. Less aggression. More hesitation. More calculation. And that's not the Verstappen Red Bull built their dominance around. That's a driver adapting to limitations. But here's the turning point. Because if this diffuser works, if the rear becomes stable, if the car finally behaves consistently, then something powerful happens. Trust returns. And when trust returns, performance follows immediately. Not gradually. Immediately. Because the driver unlocks what was already there. But if it doesn't, then the opposite happens. Doubt grows. Not just about the car, about the entire project. And once that doubt sets in, it spreads. Through decisions. Through communication. Through every lap on track. And that's when a season starts slipping away. Not because of one failure, but because of accumulated uncertainty. So when Red Bull was caught testing this Ferrari-style diffuser, it wasn't just a technical story. It was a signal. A signal that they are searching. A signal that they are no longer certain. A signal that the RB22 might not respond to the kind of fixes they expected. And that leads us to the final question. The one everything has been building toward. If Red Bull has to follow Ferrari to fix their car, then who is actually leading this era of Formula One? Because Miami won't just show lap times. It will show direction. And once direction becomes clear, the rest of the season becomes inevitable. And now, we reach the part nobody inside Red Bull wants to say out loud. Because if you follow the logic, if you connect every piece we've just uncovered, there's only one conclusion left. This diffuser test is not about winning. It's about survival. Because teams don't copy rivals when they're confident. They copy when they're running out of answers. And that's exactly where Red Bull is right now. They've tried to fix the instability. They've adjusted the floor. They've worked on the suspension behavior. They've even changed how the car manages energy. And still, the same problem keeps coming back. Unpredictability. And that tells you something critical. This is not a surface-level issue. It's not something you solve with one upgrade. It's something built into the car itself. Which means every fix is just a temporary adjustment, not a permanent solution. But here's where the situation becomes even more fragile. Because while Red Bull is experimenting, their rivals are not standing still. Ferrari is refining. Mercedes is optimizing. Every race, they get more comfortable, more precise, more efficient. While Red Bull is still searching, still testing, still asking questions they should have answered months ago. And in Formula One, that gap becomes impossible to close very quickly. But now think about what happens next. Because if Miami doesn't deliver a clear improvement, if the diffuser doesn't stabilize the car, if Verstappen still struggles to trust the rear, then Red Bull faces a reality they cannot avoid anymore. They are locked into a concept that may never fully work. And that changes everything. Strategy becomes defensive. Development becomes reactive. Expectations drop. Not publicly, but internally, everyone knows. Because at that point, you're no longer chasing victories. You're managing losses. And that's the most dangerous position for a team like Red Bull. But here's the final piece. The one that defines this entire story. Because this isn't just about the RB22. It's about what comes next. If Red Bull confirms that Ferrari's approach is the right one, then the entire future of their development changes. Not just this season. The next car. The next concept. The next era. Everything shifts. But if they're forced to make that change, it means they've already lost time. Valuable time. Time their rivals used to move ahead. So this controversial diffuser trick, it's not just a technical gamble. It's a moment of truth. A moment where Red Bull finds out whether they can still adapt fast enough, or whether they're already chasing a direction that someone else has mastered first. And the real question is no longer about this upgrade. It's about what happens after it. Because if Red Bull needed Ferrari to show them the way, then the balance of power has already changed. And the only thing left to discover is this. How far ahead is Ferrari? Before Red Bull finally catches up, if they ever do.